The sound of shattering glass echoed through the wooden house, followed by the heavy silence that only comes after words that cannot be taken back. Sarah Miller held the fragments of what had been Patriarch Jacob's favorite blue porcelain plate, the one he always asked her to use when they served special meals. The smell of fresh bread still lingered in the kitchen air, now mixed with the metallic aroma of blood dripping from her finger cut by the fragments. Her hands trembled not from physical pain, but from the realization that 17 years of absolute devotion had been discarded in a single October afternoon. "Sarah, are you all right?" Emma's soft voice, the second wife, cut through the silence like a blade. But Sarah knew that behind that apparent concern was poorly disguised satisfaction. Emma was there to witness her fall, to confirm that the hierarchy she had respected for so long was finally crumbling. 3 hours earlier, Sarah had been called to Jacob's Oak office, that same place where at 18 she had been informed she would be his first wife, chosen by the community's prophet himself. The walls lined with religious books had witnessed her joy on that distant day. Today they witnessed her humiliation. "Sarah," Jacob had said without looking up from the papers on his desk, "Rebecca will arrive tomorrow. She will occupy the main room. You will move to the annex with the others." Rebecca, 16 years old, personally chosen by Prophet Morrison during his last visit to the neighboring community. Sarah had seen the girl only once. During the presentation ceremony, golden hair braided with white ribbons, innocent blue eyes, a shy smile that made older men sigh about youth blessed by God. Now, while sweeping the plate fragments, Sarah felt each of her 35 years weighing on her shoulders. The kitchen mirror reflected brown hair already touched by silver strands, hands marked by decades of domestic work, eyes that had lost the youthful sparkle that had once made Jacob choose her among all the other young women in the community. The amber brooch that Jacob had given her on their first wedding anniversary was still pinned to her navy blue dress, the color designated for first wives. For 17 years she had worn it with pride, a symbol of her special position. Now it seemed like a relic from a time that would never return. "Mother Sarah?" Timothy's voice, her youngest son at 14, brought her back to the present. The boy stood at the kitchen entrance, his dark eyes, so similar to Jacob's, showing concern that went beyond his age. "I heard noise. What happened?" Sarah forced a smile, the same one she had perfected over the years to hide the small disappointments and frustrations of polygamous life. "Just an accident, dear. Nothing we can't fix." But as she spoke, her mind was already working. Fix, yes. There were things that needed to be fixed in the celestial community. And perhaps it was time for Sarah to take control of her own narrative. That night, after the silent dinner where Jacob formally announced Rebecca's arrival, Sarah retired to her room for the last time. Tomorrow that space would belong to someone else. The lace curtains she had hand-sewn, the embroidered quilt from long winters, the small bookshelf with her prayer books, everything would be inherited by the new favorite. Sarah opened the bottom drawer of her dresser and removed a cedar wood box. Inside were letters, not ones she had received, but ones she had intercepted over the years. Letters from desperate young women begging to leave the community. Letters from families in the outside world searching for missing daughters. Letters she had been instructed to deliver to Prophet Morrison, but which, for reasons she didn't fully understand at the time, she had kept. Now she understood. Those letters were seeds, and it was time for the harvest. The following days, Sarah watched Rebecca being installed in her former life like a spectator, watching a play in which she had been the protagonist. The girl wore her dresses, altered to fit her smaller body, slept in her bed, sat to Jacob's right during meals. The position of honor that Sarah had occupied for so long, she had forgotten what it was like to sit anywhere else. But Sarah was far from being a passive spectator. While the other wives whispered about the new order of things, she began sowing her own seeds of change. "Sister Margaret," she said to Jacob's oldest wife, a 60-year-old woman who had been assigned to the family when Jacob was still young. "Do you remember when you arrived here? You were only 15, weren't you?" Margaret paused in the middle of her embroidery, her arthritic hands contracting slightly. "It was different in those times, Sarah. We were more prepared for our responsibilities. Prepared Sarah repeated, letting the word hang in the air. Rebecca seemed so young, almost still a child. It was a small seed, but Sarah could see it had found fertile soil in Margaret's disturbed expression. With Emma, the approach was different. "You must be happy," Sarah said during an afternoon while they prepared preserves. "With Rebecca as first wife, you'll probably become second in the hierarchy." Emma, who had spent 15 years as third in the line of succession, couldn't completely hide the gleam of ambition in her eyes. "I don't think about such things," she lied. "We serve where God places us." "Of course," Sarah agreed. "Although it's interesting how God always seems to place the youngest in the highest positions, don't you think?" But Sarah's real stroke came when she decided to approach Rebecca directly. The girl was sitting in the garden, reading a magazine that had been confiscated from one of the older children. A publication from the outside world, showing young women in universities, traveling, building careers. Rebecca didn't hear her approach. "It's an interesting world out there," Sarah said softly, making Rebecca jump and try to hide the magazine. "Sister Sarah, I was just..." The girl stammered, her eyes filling with tears of guilt. "You don't need to explain." Sarah sat beside her on the wooden bench. "I used to be curious about the world beyond these mountains too. Before marrying Jacob, I dreamed of being a teacher." Rebecca looked at her with surprise. "Really? But you always seemed so satisfied here?" "Satisfied." Sarah repeated the word as she had done with Margaret. "It's an interesting word, don't you think? Means accepting what we have, even when we know there could be more." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the distant mountains that formed the boundaries of their known world. "Sister Sarah," Rebecca finally whispered, "do you think it's sinful to want other things? Things beyond being a wife and mother?" Sarah felt her heart accelerate. It was the question she had been waiting for, the crack that could expand. "Child," she said, choosing her words carefully, "I believe God gave us minds and hearts capable of dreaming for some reason. The question is what we do with those dreams." That night, Sarah wrote her first letter, not to the authorities. She knew Prophet Morrison had contacts at all levels of local government. Instead, she wrote to a television program she had seen mentioned in one of the intercepted letters, a program that investigated isolated communities and helped people who wanted to leave. The second phase of her plan required more courage. Sarah needed to document the community's practices in a way the outside world could understand. During her decades as first wife, she had witnessed arranged marriages of underage girls, physical punishments for spiritual disobedience, and the financial manipulation that kept families dependent on the prophet. Using an old Polaroid camera she found hidden in the attic, probably confiscated from some family years ago, Sarah began documenting. She photographed the overcrowded dormitories where less favored wives lived with their children. She photographed marks of physical punishment on some of the older children. She photographed the financial documents that Jacob kept locked, but to which she still had access as senior wife. But it was during the third week after Rebecca's arrival that Sarah discovered the information that would change everything. She was cleaning Jacob's office when she found a partially open drawer. Inside were correspondences between Jacob and Prophet Morrison about acquisitions, a term they used to refer to recruiting new young wives. But these weren't just letters about Rebecca. There was a list of names, ages, and monetary values. Sarah sat heavily in Jacob's leather chair, her hands trembling as she read. They weren't wives. They were merchandise. Each arranged marriage involved a financial transaction between communities, with the youngest and purest girls commanding the highest prices. Rebecca's name was at the top of the most recent list. 16 years old, exceptional value due to purity and estimated reproductive capacity. The price, $50,000. Sarah photographed each document. That night, she finished writing not just to the television program, but also to the FBI, human rights organizations, and journalists specialized in investigating religious cults. Along with each letter, she included copies of the photographs and documents she had collected. But Sarah knew that sending the letters wouldn't be enough. She needed a way to ensure her voice would be heard, even if something happened to her. That's when she remembered something Timothy had mentioned. One of the community's young men had built a hidden radio to listen to outside stations. Finding David Hutchins wasn't difficult. At 17, he was the son of one of Jacob's youngest wives and had grown up with questions about the life they led. Sarah found him in the barn, adjusting his improvised radio. "David," she said, making him almost drop the equipment in surprise, "I need your help." What followed was the most frank conversation Sarah had had in years. She showed the young man the photographs, explained what she had discovered, and proposed a plan that would require courage from both of them. David remained silent for a long time after she finished speaking. Finally, he nodded. "My younger sister turns 15 next month," he said. "I heard Jacob and Prophet Morrison talking about finding a suitable family for her. I always knew something was wrong, but I never knew what." In the following days, David used his radio to contact news stations in the outside world. Sarah, using her position as senior wife, copied more documents and records. Together, they built a case that would be impossible to ignore. The plan almost fell apart when Emma began to suspect something. "You've been strange, Sarah," she said during an afternoon while they prepared dinner. "Distant. Jacob has noticed too." Sarah forced herself to appear casual while cutting vegetables, just adjusting to the changes. It's hard to accept a new position in the family after so long. But Emma wasn't convinced. "I saw you talking a lot with that Hutchins boy. And with Rebecca. I hope you're not filling the girl's head with inappropriate ideas." It was at that moment Sarah realized her window of opportunity was closing. Emma would report her suspicions to Jacob, and any evidence she hadn't yet sent would be lost. That night, Sarah made the riskiest decision of her life. She woke Rebecca. "Child," she whispered in the darkness of the room that had been hers for so long, "I need you to be brave. Braver than you've ever been." Sarah told the girl everything. About the documents, about the prices, about what it really meant to be a celestial wife in the community. Rebecca cried silently as she listened, her tears shining in the moonlight coming through the window. "I knew," Rebecca finally whispered. "Part of me always knew. My parents, they were so happy when the prophet chose me. They talked about how our family would be blessed, but I never knew it meant money." "You don't have to accept this," Sarah said. "There are people in the outside world who can help. But you need to be strong. And maybe you need to pretend you're still the obedient wife they expect you to be. At least for a few more days." Rebecca nodded, wiping away her tears. "What do I need to do?" The final plan was simpler than Sarah had imagined. During the next Sunday community meeting, when all families gathered to hear the teachings of Jacob and Prophet Morrison, David would activate his radio on a frequency he knew a news station would be monitoring. Sarah would publicly confront the leaders with the evidence she had collected. Rebecca would support her testimony, and regardless of what happened after that, the outside world would know the truth. Sunday arrived cold and clear. Sarah wore her best navy blue dress and pinned the amber brooch, not as a symbol of her lost position, but as a reminder of how many years of her life she had given to that place. The meeting began as always with songs and prayers. Prophet Morrison, a corpulent 60-year-old man with a carefully trimmed white beard, spoke about obedience and gratitude. Jacob nodded appropriately, his new young wife sitting proudly beside him. But when it came time for testimonies, the moment when community members could stand and share their spiritual experiences, Sarah stood up. "I have something to testify," she said, her voice carrying farther than she had planned in the silent chapel. Prophet Morrison smiled condescendingly. "Of course, Sister Sarah. We know this has been a time of adjustments for you." "It has been," Sarah agreed. "A time of opening my eyes to truths I would have preferred not to see." She pulled out the folder she had prepared and began to read. Names, ages, monetary values. The description of the human trafficking system she had discovered. Details about financial manipulation, forced marriages, and child abuse. The silence in the chapel was total. Sarah could see shocked faces, wide eyes, hands covering open mouths. Jacob had stood up, his face red with anger, but Prophet Morrison held him back with a gesture. "Sister Sarah," the prophet's voice was controlled but dangerous. "You are clearly disturbed. These accusations are the product of a mind not sanctified by proper obedience." "Then explain this." Sarah held up one of the photographs of the documents. Explain why Rebecca cost $50,000. Explain why we have lists of girls with their market values. That's when Rebecca stood up. It's true, she said, her voice young but firm. I heard my parents talking about the money, about how our family was being financially blessed by my marriage. The chaos that followed was as Sarah had predicted, and worse than she had feared. Women screamed, men demanded silence, children cried in fear. Jacob advanced toward Sarah, but discovered that David Hutchins and several other young men had positioned themselves between them. The outside world already knows, Sarah shouted over the confusion. The authorities are on their way. This ends today, and it was ending. Sarah could hear, even through the tumult in the chapel, the sound of helicopters approaching. The radio stations David had contacted had done their work, and the FBI was finally coming to the celestial community. What followed in the subsequent weeks was a storm of media, legal investigations, and the slow process of dismantling decades of systematic abuse. Prophet Morrison and Jacob were arrested, along with several other leaders of related communities. Many of the younger wives chose to leave the community, some returning to families they had left years ago, others building completely new lives. Rebecca was one of the first to leave. With help from social service organizations, she enrolled in high school in a nearby town and spoke about her plans to become a nurse. I want to help other people like Sister Sarah helped me, she said in one of the many interviews she gave. Sarah chose to stay, at least initially. Someone needed to help with the transition, assist the women and children who were navigating a world that was completely new to them. She became a link between the dissolving community and government agencies and non-profit organizations that were trying to help. But on a spring afternoon, 6 months after that decisive Sunday, Sarah finally made her own departure. She packed few belongings, some books, photographs of her children, and yes, the amber brooch, which had become not a symbol of submission, but of survival. Her son Timothy, now 15, chose to come with her. I want to see what the world out there is like, Mom, he said. I want to have choices. As they drove down the dirt road that led away from the mountains, Sarah looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The celestial community, or what remained of it, disappeared in the distance. She thought of the women who had chosen to stay, those who had left, the children who would now grow up with possibilities she had never imagined in her youth. Her revenge had been complete, but Sarah realized that what she had achieved went far beyond personal revenge. She had broken a cycle that had persisted for generations, had given voice to the voiceless, had transformed her own loss into freedom for countless others. The amber brooch gleamed in the afternoon sun, and for the first time in years, Sarah Miller smiled a genuine smile. She was free, and more importantly, she had ensured that others could be too. The road stretched ahead, full of possibilities she was just beginning to imagine. At 35, Sarah was finally starting to live her own life, not the life others had planned for her. And that, she knew, was the best revenge of all. Her revenge wasn't just personal. She changed the fate of hundreds of people and exposed a system that had persisted for generations. Stories like this remind us that one courageous person can make a difference, even in the most oppressive circumstances. If you enjoyed this emotional story and want to follow more narratives that explore human strength in the face of adversity, subscribe to the channel and share with someone who needs to know that it's always possible to start over, no matter the age or circumstances.